Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Christine Wendell. I am the Director of Community Outreach with NAR's Advocacy Group, and I'm here today with NAR's entire Community Outreach team. Hugh Morris, our Manager of Community Development and Growth, and Hannon Dannenfelser, Manager of Grants and Resources, and Safia Suhaimi, our Financial Processor. Thank you again for joining us today for the Maximizing Impact with Community Outreach Grants webinar. So before we dive in, just a few housekeeping items. The webinar, of course, is being recorded. You can also access resources for this presentation, including speaker information and a link to NAR's Community Outreach page on the bottom ribbon of your Zoom screen by clicking Resources. The recording, along with resources, including the PowerPoint, will be emailed to you and posted online on our community outreach page in the coming weeks. So during the webinar, you are welcome to place your questions in the Q&A window. We will do our best to address as many questions as time permits at the end of the webinar. So if your question isn't answered live, we're going to follow up with you after the webinar. And also really important, after the webinar, you're going to receive a feedback survey via email. So please take a moment if you can to complete it, because your input is really invaluable for improving future webinars. And if you can go to the next slide. So a little bit about our community outreach programs. Of course, community outreach offers a range of advocacy tools really designed to empower state and local realtor associations to lead impactful community development and fair housing initiatives. These resources include grants, strategic guidance, legislative analysis, as well as state and local growth polling. So with the support of these grants, local and state realtor associations nationwide, honestly, are making such a difference by helping to address housing affordability, advancing fair housing, promoting smarter growth, and enhancing community livability. So now it's your turn. Over the next hour, we'll explore how your association can maximize funding opportunities for your community development and fair housing initiatives. You're going to talk about and learn about inspiring success stories and insights into eligible expenses. We'll give you tips to streamline the application process, including timelines and reimbursement process. Also talk about effective planning strategies to optimize your efforts, as well as help you connect with key contacts and additional community outreach resources to elevate your very, very important advocacy work. So with the right tools, financial support, and strategic guidance, your association can amplify its advocacy efforts and honestly make a lasting impact in your community. So let's get started. If you can go to the next slide. A little bit about the community outreach program. Of course, these are offered to state and local realtor associations to enhance your engagement and influence in community development and fair housing activities. So just a quick overview before we really dive into the particulars with our team. What's really important, only state and local realtor associations can apply for these community outreach grants in partnership, of course, with your leadership. There are 5 different grant buckets: housing opportunity, fair housing, smart growth, placemaking, and rural outreach. Each grant has a dedicated web page, and most have toolkits to provide insight into the range of activities supported by the grant, success stories, and resources. All 5 grants are offered at level 1, up to $3,000 to support speaker fees, training, and even stakeholder meetings to talk about key policy issues. And level 2, up to $7,500 for initiatives that help specifically address challenges such as housing supply and support for placemaking projects. Level 3, up to $15,000 is offered for housing opportunity and the Smart Growth Grant bucket only. And these are for wider partnership, broader community impact initiatives. So some good news, all realtor associations are eligible to apply for all 5 grant buckets at each level annually. Also, the 10% financial commitment requirement is waived for this year. And applications open up tomorrow and are open through October 15th, 2025, or until commitment level reaches capacity. So this gives you plenty of time to think about an idea, apply, and execute the initiative. And you can go to the next slide. If you'll also find on each grant page, that's all these grant pages are located on the Realtor Party site, a range of supported initiatives that are displayed on this slide. This helps you gain a better understanding of what each of the grant can support and the types of initiatives that we see coming through the program. So and if you can go to the next slide, talk a little bit about the Housing Opportunity Program. So this grant program helps associations expand access to housing that's affordable and to help with inventory and supply. So think anything under the umbrella of housing opportunities. Of course, as I stated, this grant comes in 3 different levels. So what we're seeing with this grant is associations are using it to educate realtors on down payment assistance, on loan programs within the community, or using it to bring together key stakeholders to talking about housing supply, housing affordability, and what to do in terms of addressing those issues. Level 2 under this grant, we're seeing a ton of housing needs assessment studies where you're providing that data set that helps move the needle on what's needed to match workforce requirements with housing in the community through the planning and zoning documents. Also, it's being used to conduct broader-based policy forums where we use this data set and use market statistics, for instance, to talk about how affordability is in the community and what the supply impact is. And level 3, of course, are for those broader initiatives that are partnership-led. An example would be an association partnering with a HUD certified counseling entity to help conduct first-time homebuyer courses throughout the course of the year. And just a few success stories. We had the Spokane Realtors leverage a housing opportunity level 2 to bring in the counselors of real estate that actually turned into a community outreach resource program that Hugh will talk about later to help move the needle on missing middle housing in their community. The Sacramento Realtors used the level 2 to put together a homebuyer fair, attracting more than 300 consumers to talk about first-time buyer programs in the community. And the Land of the Sky Realtors use the Housing Opportunity Level 3 to put together a cool website to help boost landlord acceptance of housing voucher programs. So love to turn it over to Hannah and Dana Felser, who's going to talk a little bit. Before I do that, I do want to provide one testimonial on our program. If you can go to the next slide, Manny, forgot about that. Just these are worth sharing. Honestly, just love the participation from the associations in our programs. And this one comes from Jessica Gauther with the Arlington Board of Realtors, who just talks about how the Housing Opportunity Program was able to expand their outreach efforts on their home buyer fair. And without this funding, she says, we would have not been able to reach those potential home buyers and educate them on the value of homeownership opportunities in the community. So with that, love to hand it over to Hannah Dannenfelser. She's our manager of grants and resources. She's going to cover our fair housing grant, our rural outreach grant, and our placemaking. Hannah?
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Christine. I'm excited to go into 2025 with many of you from state and local realtor associations. Next slide, please. All right, so our fair housing grants are a really great resource for you at the state and local associations for funding activities that create or improve systems and policies to uphold fair housing law and strengthen realtors' commitment to offering equal professional service to all. So really we're getting at trainings and resources to advance the Fair Housing Act. What we can also fund with this grant is outreach and trainings around the history of the Fair Housing Act and why we have the Fair Housing Act. So we have our level 1, which is for targeted training towards realtors. So in particular, this is very popularly used to fund NAR's bias override class, which is a really great class that goes into the science of bias and helps you learn to really train yourself to override biases and offer equal professional service. You can see we have a success story on our website where you can learn a little bit more about the bias override class. It could also be used if you were developing your own CE class at the local level. You could use it to fund instructors' fees, food, venue, things like that to put those CE classes in at your local level. It's also often used for book clubs. So if you are interested in reading Color of Law with a group and discussing it and really digging in, this is the level 1 is really great to fund a local book club. And level 2 is getting at the broader based initiatives, especially where there's maybe partnership efforts and really broad reach. So these are very commonly used for holding fair housing conferences where you open it up to your local home builders, your chamber of commerce, maybe invite your local elected officials even. That's a very common use for the level 2. It can be used for fair housing outreach campaigns and consumer campaigns if you wanted to have collateral that you were passing out to consumers to inform them on their rights. This could be used to help you fund if you wanted to put together a partnership collaboration to bring the Undesigned the Red Line exhibit, which is a really great customized pop-up exhibit to tell the history of housing discrimination across the country and in your local community. You could use the level 2 to help contribute to the funding for that. You can see some other stories here. The Long Island Board of Realtors used a fair housing, they're a mega board that used a fair housing grant to be building out their website over the last few years for consumer and community education on fair housing with categories around each protected class. And they built out the category for community members with disabilities. And that's a really great tool that they actually encourage you all to take a look at and beg, borrow, and steal in terms of working with them if you have interest in doing something similar. The Midwest City Del City Moore Association of Realtors had used this for, they're a relatively small association that really packed a punch with a big training they put together where they invited partners, including lending partners, finance partners, property management, and they did a training in collaboration with the Oklahoma Coalition for Affordable Housing. And they ended up having about 400 people in attendance for a multi-day training for a relatively small association, which was really high impact. We do have, you can see up there, a Fair Housing Grant Toolkit, which is a great resource that's on our grant landing page that you can dig in for inspiration and ideas of how you can really advance the Fair Housing Act in your community. What I will highlight with this grant is it is distinct from our Diversity and Inclusion Grant. Our Diversity and Inclusion Grant is managed by Crystal Allen, who falls within a different department. Diversity and Inclusion Grant can be used for a number of things, including enhancing your relationships with multicultural partners. If you're not sure if your initiative falls within the fair housing category or the diversity and inclusion category, I encourage you to hop on the phone with me, and I'm very happy to talk that through with you. Sometimes what I may ask for is the marketing language, agenda, things like that, so we can help differentiate if this is getting at your diversity inclusion goals or your fair housing goals. And I'm very happy to refer you to Crystal if it fits better within her grant. I'll go next slide, please. And this was a great testimonial. Freddie Garcia up at the Hudson Gateway Realtors, who maybe he's tuning in right now, is a great champion of our fair housing grants. And we had one of the benefits with this grant is you can hop on the phone and get some ideas of what other associations are doing. So Freddie and I had a nice call to talk about the ideas for things they can implement with their association, got some nice feedback on an initiative they're planning to do based on kind of just a one-on-one call brainstorming. So please feel free to utilize me as a resource if you're needing ideas. I work very closely with our fair housing policy and programs team as well. And if you have a question that's beyond my scope, I can tap into some real top-notch experts to get some additional feedback. So please leverage me as a resource. Next slide. Our rural outreach grants. So these are really great grants that are really targeted towards rural communities, and we're looking for communities that are rural in nature and have population of 30,000 or less. So if your association footprint has a rural community, then this grant is for you to give you some additional extra support. This is really getting at education, community development, and policy and initiative advocacy around rural issues. So it's very popularly used for work around broadband. Well and septic is very popular, open space preservation, environmental standards, or even planning and zoning as it relates to rural issues. So the level 1 can be used again for trainings, education materials. It's very commonly used to underwrite the expenses for well and septic classes. We find that those are really popular classes in our rural communities, and so level 1 can be used to fund that. Level 2 is again getting more into those partnerships or consumer outreach, the broader community reach. This is where workshops and conferences. If you needed to do research and reports and studies that really get into helping you develop rural policy, you can certainly do that as well. We have two examples on the side here that these are really awesome ones. The Greater Piedmont Association in Virginia actually used our rural outreach grant to put together a septic field trip. They really wanted to elevate it beyond just a classroom training and get realtors hands-on in seeing multiple different types of septic systems. So they got buses, they had overflow into cars because they had such high interest from realtors in this initiative that they drove realtors around to various examples to get to see, on site and get a really expert training. They ended up being able to offer this as a free training to realtors due to the grant underwriting of this program. The Idaho realtors, Idaho is experiencing a really high influx of new residents, which is a great opportunity for real estate, but it also opens up challenges in terms of new residents maybe not being as familiar with the importance of open space preservation. So an opportunity to put together a guide that welcomes newcomers and informs them about safeguarding Idaho's natural resources for future generations. This grant was able to cover the professional design in the first 500 copies of this book, of the booklet. Actually, it turned out the state lieutenant governor requested to have this for their office. And so there's some really great relationship building and consumer outreach there. I'll go to the next slide here. A nice testimonial from the Iron County Board of Realtors out in Utah. They were really struggling with training for realtors around water rights. And so they reached out to us for grant funding to be able to bring some water rights training. They had a realtor who developed some really great course content to get people, to get their members on track with water rights issues and transactions. And they were able to use this grant to get to push this training out virtually, especially to rural remote areas where it's sometimes harder to get some of the trainings out. So Marianne reached out, gave us some of this feedback about it ended up being a really great resource for them out there in Utah. All right, next slide, please. Our placemaking grants, these are really fun ones. These are our only grant that builds something. This is to create new outdoor public spaces, gathering places on public sites. So I just want to highlight, these are specifically for use on public land. It's to build your dog parks, your community gardens, your playgrounds, places that really, for one, enhance livable communities and advance smart growth principles and bring people in your community together to really have a sense of pride and enthusiasm about their community. For one thing, for those of you who have been using our placemaking grants for a number of years, I do want to let you know we had an update. This is not new in 2025. It's been in place for the last year or two, but we are now, we can fund improvements to existing spaces. So if you have a playground and you need to add, you feel like there's a need to add a set of swings and the playground already exists, you could use this grant to do adding in those swings. We have the level 1. So the level 1 and level 2 are going to be a little bit different than our other grants for the placemaking grant. The level 1 is for temporary pilot projects when you are testing out a space to really evaluate its ability to be a permanent space in the future. So Northwest Illinois Association had this cool one. It's a pop-up underpass where they did some murals and some seating. And it was a partnership with their visitors centers. And this is an area where pedestrians and cyclists, a lot of them go through. So that was a great, they kind of wanted to test out that space for foot traffic. And that was a really great example. Level 2 is for creating permanent spaces, permanent gathering spaces in your community that have real sticking power. So we have a good example here with the Akron Cleveland Association, a public garden that they did. This was a really nice one. One of the really important, for one, we're using this grant for creating livable communities. For two, we know that you all want to build your local relationships and your recognition and the community goodwill for your realtor members. So these are really great ways to do that. And one of the special things about this Akron Cleveland, the public garden was not only a really great community amenity that the realtors were able to support, they had realtor members come out and do some of the planting in the garden. But this actually came in at kind of a contentious time for the association with their local government. And it ended up being a really great bridge builder here. They ended up having the mayor's office sent out a press team. A local councilwoman actually came out to help with the planning. They had pedestrians and motorists honking their horns to thank them while they were setting up. They had a gentleman who came over and brought the volunteers Gatorade and water to thank them. So there's some really amazing goodwill that came out of this project that was really appreciated by the community. So keep in mind that these are really great ways that as you're building relationships with your elected officials, you want to get them excited about the ways that realtors can improve livable communities. That's where a placemaking program is really beneficial. One thing I really encourage with this grant, as you're in the idea phase and you're brainstorming, go ahead and hop on the phone with me and just run your project by me, because we want to make sure before you start making commitments to local government that, because these are collaborations with your local government, given that they're on local land. So we want to encourage that you make sure that you know that you've got kind of a verbal go ahead from me that it fits the scope of the grant. So make sure to reach on any of our grants. We encourage you to reach out proactively, but this one in particular, I also want to give a recommendation on the placemaking grants that you front load your applications earlier in the year because of the grant, because we have the grants now on a calendar year cycle. The funds do expire at the end of the calendar year. What we see with the placemaking grants is there are sometimes delays with permitting processes and just general some government bureaucracy sometimes can slow these down a little bit. So we recommend earlier in the year for these applications, so you give yourself the flexibility and wiggle room to allow for some of those bumps in the roads that do inevitably end up coming up. I'm going to go to next slide, please. Our Spaces to Places blog, this is a really great resource that it's a fun one for you to, and go ahead and scan that QR code if you're curious there. This is a great resource to follow stories of really great placemaking projects all across the country. So these stories are actually written in the voice of the association. So I get to work with some of y'all who have had really cool projects to have you actually write the story, and then we push them out throughout the realtor community to really demonstrate the ways that you're making a positive impact in your community and building relationships and recognition along the way. Next slide, please. So I wanted to share one thing that was really exciting this year for placemaking. Our placemaking program is we really expanded our resources that you have available to you with this program. For one, if you logged on early to this webinar, you might have seen our brand new placemaking promotional video. It's an 8-minute video that tells the story of multiple placemaking projects across the country and really helps paint the picture of the impact that these grants can have and these projects that you all lead can have. So this video is not only it's a great tool that you could show to your board to get your members really excited about a project. It's something you could send to your elected officials to give them a little taste of how realtors can show up and support your community in building places. It's something you could put on your social media. So really encourage you to take a look at that promo video. We did do a full refresh of our placemaking toolkit. It's packed with resources and stories of success that you can pass around. It's a digital toolkit that you can pass around to your team to really dig in to try to get some ideas and inspiration for getting started. We also developed a placemaking flyer. It's a 2-page flyer. So if you're looking to have it's about the grant. And so if you're looking to have handouts in your community, if you have a meeting coming up with your board and you'd like to pass out the flyers for them to be able to see, we have flyers available that you can print. And you can share digitally to give folks kind of a summary and it's a 2-sided flyer and give you a summary and overview of that placemaking program. So if you have any questions about the placemaking program, please feel free to reach out. It's a really, really popular one. It builds, like I said, it does build a lot of goodwill. We really love seeing the stories that happen across the country. Next slide, please. This is a great testimonial we got from the Iowa City area that they were just really excited about the recognition and the relationship building that came out of these grants. One technical note I just want to note that I did miss here. We do have a limit on the budget of the placemaking projects. We will fund up to $7,500 to fund the building materials for a project that goes up to a total budget of $500,000. So if you have a project in your community that is larger than that, then that is not the right one for this placemaking project. And we're looking for projects where they're really realtor led and you're getting real member engagement and recognition in your community for being involved in these projects. All right, that's it for me. I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to my colleague, Hugh Morris, who is, as Christine mentioned, our Community Development and Smart Growth Manager. Take it away, Hugh.
Thank you, Hannah. Good to be with you, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to talk here about our Smart Growth Grants, which is one of the suite of 5 that we've got, and the structure is the same here. So the idea behind the Smart Growth Grants is that they are there to fund your engagement in your community with partners or to start something on your own that relates to the concept of smart growth, which is kind of development that is mixed land uses, and enhances the idea of walkability, public transit, biking, green space preservation. Some of this could be involved zoning issues, things like that, or planning, which communities and cities do a lot of. So the level 1 here is, like with the other grants, is sort of focused on education, and NAR through the Center for Realtor Development does have a planning and zoning course that you can use this grant to help underwrite the costs associated with hosting that. The other way you can use the level 1 is to, if your community is really struggling with some particular aspect of growth and development, and you would like to bring in a national expert who can sort of give you a deep dive on that particular topic, transit-oriented development or zoning changes from maybe the old school Euclidean zoning to new form-based codes. What's the difference? How do form-based codes work? We can help you find an expert. You can use the grant to either if they can come in live and in person, that's always great. Or you could pay the honorarium, even if it's just having them there through Zoom. So, and you can have anybody you want in the room. You could just have it be for members only, or you can invite local elected officials, the staff planners, the Chamber of Commerce, other community leaders, and the idea there is you have everybody in the room hearing this expert talk about the issue that's of concern, and that way all of you go away having had firsthand exposure to some cutting edge ways to deal with that issue. And so that's a really nice way to use the level 1. And the other thing you can do with the level 1 is, though Hannah has the placemaking grant, if you want to bring somebody in to provide some education about placemaking, sort of a tutorial on what it is, how you do it, recipes for success, you can use the Smart Growth level 1 to host that educational experience. And then, like the other grants, the level 2, and with Smart Growth, the level 3 is really there to sort of start doing the work. Once you have some education around an issue, you can start creating and becoming involved in that activity. So, the level 2 can be used for conducting a study, like if you're on the front end of some project and having some good fresh data that is specific to your community, it might be useful. Then you can use the level 2 for that. Bringing in a consultant to sort of help get some planning going around a particular issue. You can, and cities do a lot of planning, and often as part of that planning, the city is required to have a public input session. Well, a lot of realtor associations have found it actually using the grant to go to their city and say, we would like to be part of this process. We'd be happy to host the community input session. It could be at the public library or school. You can use the grant to pay for all the costs associated with that, hosting that session. And what it does for you is it also gives somebody in your association the opportunity to stand up in front of the public, whoever showed up, to welcome everybody and sort of say, the realtors are glad that everybody's here, and that everybody's voice is important in the quest to sort of figure out the vision for the community going forward. You can also then use the level 2 to have sort of a more sophisticated and bigger educational experience by supporting a conference or a forum, hosting it and maybe speaking at it, and certainly designing the agenda. And then the level 3, as Christine said early on, is there for sort of just like bigger, longer, higher impact projects, having multiple partners being involved with that and so on. And as Hannah said, call us. We're happy to talk stuff through. That is basically the recipe for success for for getting any of these. We do have a toolkit there that you'll be able to click to. And that, like the others, sort of talks about not only the process of applying for the grant, but also some like our best of case studies, if you will, success stories around that have used the Smart Growth grants. And just 3 real quick case studies that are kind of interesting. So the Adirondack Association in New York used 3 grants, right? So they used 3 grants to help them build towards something. So they used the level 1 to educate some education around for members and local elected officials and the chambers of commerce, just around smart growth, what it is, how it works. And then they used the level 2 to do some data collection, and then a level 3 to produce a guide that's for developers, contractors, banks, housing advocates, that all talks about smart growth and what the town has done to facilitate smart growth development in their downtown core. The Boise Association, the second success story there, used the level 2 grant to do a series of workshops hosted by the Urban Land Institute. It's a program called Urban Plan, and you get a bunch of people in the room, and you basically use Legos to sort of game out a sort of a smart growth development, and different colors represent different types of building, and you're given certain constraints you need to meet. And that was just a very fun way to sort of get some nitty-gritty hands-on about the complexities of doing development. And then lastly, I'm just going to leave you with this last one, this 5 years later. So this was in South Carolina beach community, Myrtle Beach. And they were having, a lot of tourists come there to go to the beach. They were having big walkability problems, a lot tourists crossing streets, kind of chaotic. And they brought in a national walkability expert to sort of diagnose what they could do. Dan Burden made his plan, left it with them. And 5 years later, we learned they've been implementing this. They've had great success, and they still have some of Dan's steps to go. And just a lesson that some of these things take a while. Next slide, please. And just a real quick quote. So this out of the St. Paul Association. What was interesting here is the St. Paul Association in Minnesota is certainly about the city of St. Paul, but they have 12 counties in their service area. And they were looking for a way to sort of get connected to some of those smaller communities out in those other counties. And they've year after year been using our grants to go to those communities and say, we'd like to work with you. And a lot of it's around walkability, sort of these old small towns, and sort of enhancing the walkability of them. And they just had great success using the grants to sort of build that connectivity. And that's what I've got. And I'm going to turn it back to Christine.
Thanks so much, Hugh. Love those wins. Thank you all. And just a little bit more about our community outreach requirements. Now that you've heard the levels, you've listened to the success stories, you've heard the testimonials, let's talk a little bit about the application process and the post-approval process. So first and foremost, I think Hannah brought this home. Contact us for any questions, or sign up for a community outreach planning session. That's the first stop. That's going to allow you to brainstorm ideas and to determine whether your idea is a fit for the program, and then also talk about other types of programs within NAR that we can refer you to. Submit your completed application beginning tomorrow. So you have up to 13 months to submit your idea, get it approved, and then execute your initiative. And again, applications are accepted through October 15th of next year, or until the commitment level reaches capacity, and we will notify the associations if and when that happens. And I also put this answer in the chat for someone who asked this. Approval notifications for level 1 and level 2, those will happen typically the week after you submit an application. So if you submit by 12 o'clock on Friday, typically you'll get an approval notification the following week, unless there is a holiday the next week, or there's a log jam in our system, which rarely happens, but it could happen. And the level 3 is a little different. So those grants, which of course are housing opportunity and smart growth, those are reviewed by a committee, and those may take up to 3 weeks from submission to approval. And then your initiative must be conducted between January 2nd and December 17th next year, and to also submit your reimbursement by December 17th. So I'm going to hand it over to Sophia Suhaimi, our financial processor. She's going to walk you through the post-approval process and need-to-know information.
Hello everyone. I'm Sophia, the processor for this community outreach grant program. So as for the post-approval process, your application will be approved between December 4th, 2024 to October 15th, 2025. And you must submit your reimbursement request by December 19 next year. Once your activity or project has been completed, you will need to submit the online evaluation form describing how the project went and its impact. We would like to understand what made it successful. Additionally, please upload any photos, videos, or press release. Then you should email all the required documents such as reimbursement Excel form, receipts, cancel check, or any other proof of payment to the general inbox or to me. Oh, sorry. Okay. Again, like this year, we will waive the 10% commitment. And please bear in mind when filing out your reimbursement form, the reimbursement will only cover expenses and not initiative with net revenue. Next slide, please. Okay. Once your application has been approved, you will receive the reimbursement form that looks like this in your approval email package. We will send the approval notification within 2 or 3 weeks of your application submission. Your reimbursement form will be pre-filled with grant details such as your association name, your level, and your approved grant amount. This form is designed to ensure you are reimbursed for the next expenses or costs. So we will not reimburse any net profit generated from the event. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, now we have the eligibility and ineligibility of the grant fund use. So when you are about to fill out the reimbursement form, please ensure that you only claim eligible expenses related to the grant, such as consultant or speaker fees, venue rental, refreshment, marketing, education-related materials. We are sorry that that the grant cannot be used for the association staff time, general operating expenses, cash prizes, purchase of the in-house association classroom rental fee, registration fee, or travel-related expenses attending events. Please also know that the reimbursement fund will be issued to you, the association, and not the other third parties. Next slide, please. Here, as you can see, we would like to share some of the many feedbacks we received this year. We are grateful for your interest in this community outreach grant program. Thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts and write back to us. We appreciate all of them. Well, that's all for me. Next slide, please, and back to Christine.
Thank you so much. And just a couple of FAQs we received throughout the year. What are the levels? Again, level 1 up to 3,000, level 2 up to 7,500, level 3 up to 15,000. And so just remember that the level 3 is only for housing opportunity and smart growth, but all of them come in level 1 and level 2, all 5 grants. And how many grants can we receive in a calendar year? You're allowed to receive 1 grant per funding level per calendar year, which adds up to quite a bit of money if you decided to leverage each grant at each level. And are you required to make a financial contribution? No, you are not required to do that. And the next slide. And then what criteria do you use to evaluate the grant? So the initiative must align with the purpose of the grant, and also allow a significant level of commitment in terms of member involvement and staff time. So it's not merely sponsoring an event or cutting a check to an organization. It must align with the focus of the grant, and then requires member involvement and staff time. And we're partnering with another realtor association. Can we all apply for the grant? The answer is yes. Up to 4 state and local realtor associations can apply for the funding of a specific initiative, but you cannot submit the reimbursement for the same expense. So in other words, one association can pick up a speaker fee, the other association can pick up the venue rental, so on and so forth. And of course, please note NAR's territorial jurisdiction policy. And if my association is approved for a grant, when we'll receive the funding, we've talked a little bit about this throughout the webinar, you're going to receive a funding through the reimbursement process. So you must submit your evaluation form, as Sophia said, your reimbursement form, your W-9, your proof of payment, which are your receipts, canceled checks, within 90 days of the initiative, and then we will turn around and send that funding back to you electronically. And if you can go to the next slide. And more importantly, how do we, learn about how to use these grants? So discuss your initiative and your idea with staff. Our contact information is here. Review the grant sites for ideas, review the toolkits, learn about the FAQs, and then also go through the initiatives. It was that 5th slide we mentioned on common initiatives that are supported, and submit your association's application. That's what you do. We'll get back to you the following week and then conduct the supported initiative. So pretty easy. I know Megan is going to put the community outreach page in the chat as well. And it's also under resources for more information on all of that. And if you go to the next slide, and I'm going to hand it over back to Hugh, who's going to just cover our community outreach resources that are outside of our grant program for more information.
Great. Thank you, Christine. And I believe my video is locked if somebody could unlock it, but there we go. Thank you. So we've got 4 other resources that we just wanted to make you sort of quickly available, aware of. And some of these sort of dovetail nicely with sort of the grant work. And so on we go. So the first one we have, and again, all of these are available on our Realtor Party website. You can learn more details. And next slide, please. We have specific slides for each one. So the Transforming Neighborhoods resource is a really lovely resource. We're sort of in our 4th year, I believe. And this is something we do in collaboration with the Counselors of Real Estate, which is a collection of about 1,000 real estate experts worldwide. The CRE is an affiliate of NAR, and they have something they call the Consulting Corps. And the idea there is that they just find these real estate challenges in communities and put together a team of 5 of their members. And their members are people who have been working in real estate from one angle or another for decades, right? So, and they tend to have, a law degree, maybe in land use law, an MBA in finance, urban planning degree, sort of they have some deep education, but still focused on real estate. And they'll come to your town for a week and interview a lot of people, tour the sites, and then at the end of the week, they'll sort of put together their thoughts about how to resolve this real estate challenge and present it to the community. And so that's what the Consulting Corps does. And the Transforming Neighborhoods specifically is where NAR will pay the full cost of this. This is done by application. The application should be opened, I think today, we're a day or 2 delayed. And then the application closes in early February, the 7th, I believe. And the idea here is we focus primarily, it's a local realtor association in partnership with the city. These projects work best on publicly owned land because then the public sector has site control, and that makes all the difference in whether something goes forward. So I'm just going to give you a couple quick examples. top one here, the consulting corps went to Paradise, California, which was the town in 2018 that was completely burned down by the Camp Fire. And the challenge there was, how do you rebuild when everything is gone? And do it in a way that quickly, and also so that ideally that will never happen again. And so the counselors sort of produced some thoughts on how to go about that. Christine mentioned how the Spokane Realtors actually used the Housing Opportunity Grant to help hire the counselors of real estate. And this was before we had Transforming Neighborhoods, but it's what launched that program. And the counselors went there and sort of helped do a deep dive into some of the city's codes and so forth about how to sort of unlock housing development, because they, like everywhere else, were having a sort of housing crisis. And a third one I'm just going to tell you about from this year is the San Antonio Board of Realtors has a school district that they partnered with, and that school district is mothballing 15 schools. So that's a lot of land, some big structures. And how do you do that was the big question. And also, how do you do it in a way that is sensitive to the community and creates something positive for that community going forward? So next slide, please. The Land Use Initiative. This program has been around at NAR for well over 20 years. It's where NAR partners with a land use law firm in Boston named Robinson and Cole. The way the program works is NAR, again, will pay the full cost of this. And the idea is that if you're a jurisdiction, public jurisdiction in your community has introduced a piece of legislation, an ordinance for vote in the city or county council, and you would like to know what that does with regard to sort of land use and particularly its impact on the real estate business, you can submit that language to us and we will send it up to Robinson and Cole. It takes them up to 3 weeks to sort of really digest it. They'll have a call with you, see what your attitudes are towards this piece of pending legislation. They will digest it, write up some talking points and analysis of the impact, pros and cons on the real estate industry, and then you can use that in your advocacy for or against that piece, that land use ordinance. And you can see here on the screen a whole range of topics that are the most common ones that we see Robinson and Cole going through for associations. And I'll just say, new for 2025, we're expanding the program a little bit in that if sometimes when an ordinance is passed, it is done so very quickly. And what happens is they will, within 2 weeks, if within 2 weeks that ordinance is sort of opened back up to be revisited by the political body, you are free to submit that proposed revisions to that ordinance to Robinson and Cole for analysis. And so there's a sort of a tight window there, but that seems to be something that has been of interest to some associations, and we're going to test that out this year. And next slide, please. The State and Local Growth Polling Program. This is perhaps my favorite one that we have. This is another program where NAR pays the full cost. It takes about 2 months start to finish. And the idea here is that we will fund a poll in your community around growth and development issues. So not political at all, but you can poll the community on something very specific like transit or walkability, or you can sort of go wide and dabble in a couple of different topical areas about growth and development. How should we grow? Where should we grow? What do we need? What do we have too much of? How do we want to pay for growth? All those are sort of interesting questions to see how the community is feeling about growth. And there's an application form. It basically asks what the issue is that you'd like to poll on. Once it's approved, we'll connect you with our pollster, Joe Good of American Strategies, and he will then sort of interview you about what you want to learn and the possible answers he might find when he does that. And then he will draft the survey instrument, send it to you for review. You go back and forth until everybody's mostly happy. And then he will field the poll and write up the results, including a PowerPoint with some very lovely graphs. And this is fabulous. You can use it, hold it very close to the vest and just sort of do it with your association, or you can invite in other community partners to sort of be collaborators in this. And that has some benefits as well, which I'm willing to talk through if you're interested in that program. And next slide, please. And lastly, we have the On Common Ground magazine, which we have been publishing twice a year for over 20 years. This is it's about 60 pages long. The idea here is it's got 10 articles all around a particular theme. And you can see a couple of those pictured here in the bottom, that one with the sort of the setting sun about zoning, innovations in zoning. And so 10 different articles about that, community engagement, sustainability and climate risk. And our latest one, sort of planning for, for multiple generations and how do you create a place, a town, a community that works for people in a variety of generations. And so what we do here is we print about a good number of these every year. And the idea here, that really what's driving it, is that we make these available to you at no cost. And we can do that in one of two ways. One is we can mail a box of them to you, whether it's 50 or 100. And each time it's produced in May and November. And the idea there is, you tuck a few under your arm each time you go out into the community, visit City Hall, talk with the mayor. And it is a fabulous leave behind. It's lightly branded with the Realtor R, and it reminds the recipient that the realtors are interested in land use, knowledgeable about it, and want to be at the table when land use decisions are being considered in the community. And the articles are really good. I always learn a lot. I'm very involved in putting this together, and I still learn a lot every time we put one together. So there are some really useful articles in there. The other way we can get it to you is you can submit on a template. We have a mailing list and of people you would like to receive it, and we will mail it directly to those people. And the first time we do that, we can enclose a letter from your association on your association's letterhead that sort of lays out for the people who are receiving it, who it's from, and why you think they might enjoy it. So that's On Common Ground. It's also available digitally, an Apple app and a Google Play app, as well as on our website. So I think that's everything I've got. Back to you, Christine.
Great. Thank you so much, Hugh. And just to wrap up and just some key reminders again, after the session, if you want to brainstorm with us, sign up for a community outreach planning session, easy sign up. You sign up, we'll respond with the Zoom link. Feel free to share it with your staff. Feel free to share it with your leaders, anyone you want to bring to the conversation within your association. If you go to the next slide. Also, your advocacy resource guide. This is your go-to one-stop shop for all of the Realtor Party advocacy grants and resources that NAR houses. So anywhere from issues mobilization programs to IE programs to Advocacy Everywhere, our consumer advocacy outreach grant, you're going to find information about that along with our RPAC fundraising grants in the guide. So please feel free to download that guide. And I'll also drop it in the chat as well. And if you go to the next slide. Also, success stories. This is your opportunity to shine. When you have an initiative that is groundbreaking, out of the box, we're going to promote it and to share it with others. This is also your portal for understanding how your fellow AEs, GADs, communications directors, education directors are leveraging these grants to advance their community development and fair housing initiatives. So please bookmark this page to gain insight and inspiration. Next slide. And this is my favorite quote from Jamie McMillan, who's the VP of Governmental Affairs with Akron Cleveland. She tells us, and she's what we call our power user for these grants. I cannot say enough about how important these grants are to our advocacy efforts. They help us connect with our public officials, help us convey the importance of advocacy and the Realtor Party to members. So keep that in mind when you're leveraging these grants. They do so much to help you engage your members, to help you advocate, to help you build relationships and build the foundation for your advocacy success. And if you go to the next slide, just a couple of upcoming webinars that you're going to find hopefully inspirational in terms of helping you leverage some of these other grants and resources from our program. So coming up, we're planning to have a webinar focused solely on that land use initiative that Hugh talked about, where we're talking to associations about how they leverage that tool to oppose key ordinances that were harmful to real estate. We're going to do a deep dive into smart growth and how communities are using that smart growth grant to really help leverage community livability and progress moving forward. And then putting on a very, like what we did last year, fair and attainable housing ideas forum, collaborating for inclusive home ownership. This is Hannah's brainchild, where she does a deep dive into these issues and puts you into breakout groups so you can talk to each other and gain inspiration for how to move forward with your initiative. Also, going to tackle our rural outreach grants to discuss how communities and associations are using these grants to help expand broadband, talk about open space preservation, environmental standards, and more. And then also we'll wrap the year up with our annual Transforming Neighborhoods program on how to use this program to help tackle commercial disinvestment, recover from natural disaster, and then fill those housing gaps. And all of our webinars will be housed on our webinar site, so feel free to bookmark that. You'll also, of course, receive an email from us, as you always do, communicating those webinar availability. And if you can go to the next slide. Any questions? Contact us. This is what we're here for. You have our numbers, you have our emails. We're happy to talk to you at any time and to answer your questions and to help you bring these funds back to the association. Also, we did answer a lot of questions in the chat. I see a few more. There's a question, Hugh, from Alex. He says, I thought the OCG mailings used to be limited to 200. Did I see that correctly? Hugh, do you care to answer that? Would you mind answering that, please?
Sure. Yes, so I may have under spoke. And I believe 200 is what's stated on the website. And,
okay, great. And then community outreach planning sessions. Sure, we'll, if you Google community outreach planning sessions, it's also in the community outreach page that Megan put in the resources. You'll be able to sign up for that session. Okay, great. And so I will, if someone could quickly grab that link and put that in there, that would be wonderful. But yeah, please do that. And we, of course, thank you so much for your time today and your effort, your past use of the grant. And we so look forward to meeting with you to help you advance your advocacy, engagement, and education efforts moving forward. Thanks so much again.